Hello and welcome to Freed Indeed Live. I'm your host, Kevin J.N. Hughes, and Sako, my main man, is here with me today for our part two on the patriarchy. Um,
And I just wanted to apologize to y'all because I done slept in last time. I was a,
well,
I was a, I was a sleepy boy.
well, I want to reiterate, last those who saw the last show know that I had a lot of kind words to say for you, Sako, because truly it inspires me. Um, and I don't say that lightly, but it's just an honor that you continue to work with me. You continue to make these podcasts with me so that we can get this stuff out. Even though you've moved to another country, our schedules don't align like they used to, but you're continuing the work and just truly your commitment to this really it inspires me to do more and work harder with this because if it means that much to you, then like this it that means a lot to me. So you
Yeah,
don't have to apologize. In fact, everybody here at Freed Indeed Ministries and all of our viewers, thank you so much for continuing to participate, and we hope that your work there in Armenia will be blessed by God.
thanks. And God willing, hopefully if we can get all our schedules to line up, we should do a video with you, me, and Caleb together.
Yes. Any topic, anything. I want to do
Yeah.
that.
He
Yes.
really likes debunking neo-paganism, so we could do that together.
I know. I do. Yes. We should totally do that.
Yeah.
All right. So last time I ended on Titus 2, and I was just talking to Sako before we started, because I ended on Titus 2 because I wanted to make a particular point, and that point was that the patriarchy is eminently practical. Um, at least the way that Christianity presents the patriarchy is actually very pragmatic. It's not just some idea that we're striving towards. It is that, but it's not just that. The and every single Christian person has a role to play in the patriarchy. We are not The patriarchy isn't about saying, only men have this role. No, God has a purpose and plan for each person, and Titus 2 helps us to see what that purpose and plan is, so that, like, when people say, oh, well, I just want to find God's plan for my life, Titus 2 tells you God's plan for your life. If you're an older man, your job is to be sober minded of sound doctrine and training up the youth with your wisdom. If you're an older woman, your job is to train up young women to be obedient to their husbands and to love their children. If you're a young woman, your job is to learn that discipline and that obedience and that love and compassion. And if you're a young man, your job is to learn how to be beyond reproach, to learn how to live a life that is in Christ and that is a pattern of good works. Um, and so now Sako is here, and he is going to help me to launch from that springboard and basically
Hmm.
pick up where I left off last time with those very pragmatic concerns. So now that I have laid a foundation for us
Yeah.
from examining scripture, Sako, why don't you kind of take us through where you wanted to go with this whole patriarchy topic?
Right. By the way, if I have my phone out, it's because I'm getting some verses ready. I'm having AI find the verses for me that we're gonna use
Yeah,
because I
no
totally
problem.
forgot. But so this section, and I'll sort of talk while I'm working
And
here.
if I have my phone out, it's because I'm playing mobile games while we're talking. No, I'm just, just I'm
Uh,
just
what the hell? No kidding. um,
Oh,
but yeah, so basically what I'm doing right now, because this section is gonna be about what the patriarchy is not.
yes.
clearing up misconceptions. And here to help me with that is everybody's favorite little girl loving prophet Muhammad. So
Muhammad
so
is
right
an
now,
excellent
right now I'm
example of
pull,
what
I'm
the
trying to
patriarchy is not.
right now I'm trying to pull up some passages from the Quran and the Hadiths to sort of to contrast with the Christian ideal.
That's awesome. Yeah. Muhammad is an awesome example of what the patriarchy is not. Um, so yeah, and this is actually a really good point because I have encountered people who hear what we're saying from scripture and they're like, "Oh, well, so you think women should be, in burqas and you must love Islam or whatever stupid thing that people say." But
Yeah.
what those people don't realize is that Islam doesn't really represent the patriarchy at all. And the reason why I say that is because, again, look at Titus 2. The patriarchy isn't just about, like, what men are supposed to do, or isn't just about, trying to subjugate women. The patriarchy is actually about men and women living up to their full potential as men and women, living up to the fullness of what they are as men and of what they are as women. And one of the things that I hate about Islam is actually the fact that Islam basically is Islam isn't really patriarchal so much as misogynistic. It hates women and wants to subdue them as if women are a problem that needs to be solved. So that's why, like, the Quran commands men to beat their wives, and even strange things like, societally speaking, Islam is against homosexuality, but like on an individual level, dudes
Oh,
are
okay.
committing homosexuality.
You can hear me, right?
Yes,
Okay. Yeah, it's against adult male homosexuality. If it's young boys, it's a lot more
right.
ambiguous.
Exactly. So like the dancing boys of Afghanistan, stuff like that, totally permissible within Islam, despite the fact that that's like manifest hypocrisy. If you had sex with an adult male, you have to get thrown off of a roof. But if it's a 12-year-old boy and he's dressed like a woman, which by the way, the false prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, also liked to dress up like a woman. Um,
Side note,
but
real quick, what do you think is funnier, piss be upon him or police be upon him?
definitely police be upon him, especially after you read the sections. If you're gonna read the sections I think you're gonna read, then I think even Western Muslims are gonna be crying out police be upon him. Um
Yeah.
like have you ever do you listen to David Wood at all? Because I love David Wood's debates against Muslims, and it's just like, oh, yeah, like he was debating this one Muslim, and the dude was like, "Yes, but the Prophet Muhammad was a pedophile, and we are proud of that." And I'm like, "What?" Oh my goodness, it's crazy. It's crazy. Anyway, do you have those do you have those quotes you wanted up yet? Or do you need a couple more minutes? I think Sako might be having some technical difficulty. Yeah, Sako's got his camera turned off. Okay, no worries, bud. Whenever you're ready. In the meantime, so some other things that so I think what the sort of broad concept that we're
Testing, testing.
there you are. There he
Okay.
is.
Okay, let me see. Now let me figure out what's going on with the video. 1 second.
Yeah, no problem. The
There we go. Okay.
triumphal return.
Yeah, I was saying I sent them to you on Messenger, the
Oh,
passages.
okay. Nice. Let's get this up here. There you are. Okay. So we've got these um so yeah, I think the broad concept that we're sort of driving at here is going to be the contrast between um the Christian patriarchy, which is actually about all people living according to the divine logos, or the, I guess it would actually be the logoi, in each of us, that the divine logos has created the world in such a way, and this is how we live according to that, versus Islam, where women are seen more as like a problem, and it's very, sort of, to use a modern term, misogynistic. So,
Yeah.
do you want me to start reading these passages?
Yeah.
All right. So Quran, Surah 4, verse 34, quote, Men are the protectors and maintainers of women because Allah has given the one more strength than the other, and because they support them from their means. Therefore the righteous women are devoutly obedient. As to the women on whose part ye fear disloyalty and ill conduct, admonish them and refuse to share beds and beat them. So
Yeah.
I was
It's like
actually,
okay, it started out good. It
I
started
know, I
out
was
good.
gonna say, like, okay, it started out good, and then right as I was about to say that, I saw and refused to share their beds and beat them. So
Yeah.
you
It
can
is it
see,
is it is not permissible in any uh okay, to be fair, I have
yeah,
not spent that much time reading the church canons, so I hope I'm right about this. But as far as everything I've seen, in scripture, it is absolutely not permissible to
that's
lay
right.
hands on your wife.
Yeah, it's never permissible to lay hands on your wife. That's pretty much universal in Christianity. Uh, Also, I would say that this is a really good example, though, of um, we were talking, or I was talking last week about
Mhm.
how Scripture commands men to treat their wives, and how Scripture commands men to teach their wives, versus
Yeah.
this. Like, think about, compare what we just read with this, okay? Um, Second Timothy, or First Timothy 2, sorry, First Timothy 2, um let's go down here to verse 11. Let a woman learn in silence with all submission, and I do not permit a woman to teach or have authority over a man, but to be in silence. For Adam was formed first, then Eve, and Adam was not deceived, but the woman being deceived fell into transgression. Nevertheless, she will be saved in childbearing if they continue in faith, love, holiness with self-control. So compare that with Islam. Islam is like, hey, if your wife steps out of line, you should beat her up. Christianity says, nope, that's not how it works. We yes, we're called to teach our wives, but we're called to teach our wives with holiness, with faith, love, and self-control. Or also
Yeah.
First Peter 3 verse 7, which says, Husbands likewise dwell with them in understanding, giving honor to the wife as to the weaker vessel, as being heirs together in the grace of life, so that your prayers will not be hindered. So it's literally the opposite. If you, as a husband,
Mhm.
start beating your wife, God is not hearing your prayers. Your prayers are hindered when you mistreat your wife. God sees our
Yeah.
wives as a treasure, not as a problem to be solved by baiting them into submission.
Right.
So, Sako, you were
And the
about to say
model.
something.
Okay. Yeah, you can hear me, right?
Yes. Yeah, you were saying something, and I kept kind of accidentally cutting you off.
It's all good. I was gonna say like the model for how a husband should be towards his wife is is actually ironically right. Like this is this is gonna get. I'm about to make piss off some of the MGTOW red pill people.
Yeah,
But the Christian ideal, if you're a husband, far from laying hands on your wife, it's in some cases it's actually the opposite. If she's unfaithful, if she's like not treating you right, and this that the other thing, you're actually expected to bear with her. Like
right.
the model for this is God's relationship with Israel and later the church. Like the whole narrative arc throughout the Bible is Israel keeps playing the harlot with all these demons and false gods, right?
Mm-hmm.
But no matter how far they fall, and sure, uh, God might discipline them, uh, but even His discipline is essentially in the form of like He gives them over to the
Yeah,
consequences. Like, okay, you're worshiping these false gods. Uh, you like, okay, let's see if those gods will protect you. And
exactly.
you know, the, and somebody might say, well, okay, like God does actually like, you know, discipline Israel severely when they get out of line. But to be fair, the metaphor for God's relationship with Israel is sometimes that of a bride and groom, and sometimes that of a father and children, because He
Right,
also calls Israel His son. So we're not against disciplining children with the rod.
right. Well, that's true, but also I would
So
point out that God's discipline of Israel is done in this temperate and loving way in which first of all Israel is so God forbid, let's say that my wife like left me tomorrow and was like living in separation from me and maybe she was living sinfully and then let's say that when she's doing this, she gets beat up by a mugger or a boyfriend or something, and then she comes running back to me looking for my protection. And I said, well, how am I supposed to protect you if you're living off somewhere? I can't be there. This is why you should have stayed with me. That's what God is. It's a consequence for their actions. God is saying, you worship
yeah,
these false gods. Let's see if these false gods can protect you. Or
yeah,
he's even in some cases saying, okay, you worship the false gods. Well, here, you're given into the hands of the worshippers of those gods then. Now those
yeah.
gods own
Although
you.
to be fair, there are sometimes when the language implies more active punishment because He says like, "I will stir up the chariots of Assyria against you,
Right.
and like they will come like locusts and stuff."
That
So
is true.
so just bear in mind that the relationship between God and Israel is simultaneously often allegorized as that between a father and son, and that between a husband and wife. So
Right.
so when it's talking about severe discipline, that's the father part coming out. When it's talking about God's long suffering and bearing with Israel's constant unfaithfulness, that's the husband part,
Right. I would
and to some
also
extent
say
the
that the
father part.
principal example where we see God's relationship to the church as a husband is not really in the Old Testament, but in the New Testament. The principal example is Christ
Yeah,
and Christ laying down his life for an unfaithful bride. He dies for Israel, even though Israel is putting him to death. And
yeah,
Israel is rejecting their own Messiah, and he still dies for them. That's the
right.
ultimate example of what a husband is supposed to live like.
Yeah, exactly. So yeah, like sorry, red pill guys, but by your standards, the Christian ideal essentially, results in what you would call a cooked meal or whatever.
Well, yeah, no,
But
I posted a bunch of quotes one time from St. John Chrysostom, and I got a bunch of comments from red pill dudes saying, "Oh, this is simping," and I'm like, "No, it's not simping because We're talking about the relationship of a husband and his wife, not you and your OnlyFans star that you're paying money to, which, like, that's simping.
Yeah,
Um, but also, like, the context of this is that we do this and um and it works out so that it calls forth the submission of the woman. The woman learns submission through seeing you practice this Christ-like love and loving leadership. Um
and yeah,
yeah, go
and
ahead.
if she doesn't, that's between her and God.
Right. Yeah, that's her sin. But I would also venture to say, like, I'm going to be completely honest with you. I have
Hmm.
seen this work so many times that I can confidently say that in the majority of cases, like, women do if you actually practice the faith, women do eventually come around. Like, not obviously not every single time. There are horror stories, and I'm not telling you, like, what I'm not saying is go out and marry a prostitute because it worked for Hosea. That is not what I'm saying. Like, don't do that. But what I am
Wait,
saying,
but wait,
yeah,
did
go
it
ahead.
work for Hosea? Did she ever like come around or no?
Well, the text leaves it ambiguous, which, to be honest, I think is probably I think it has to be ambiguous because of um because of the individual person. You know, if
Hmm.
you can die in apostasy, and that's a real possibility. Um, so it leaves it ambiguous. But so yeah, that's part of the reason why I'm saying, like, I'm not telling you, make just marry whoever you want. If you're shacking up with some woman, you should just marry her
Hmm.
and then try to live the Christian life or whatever. That's not what I'm saying. What I
Hmm.
am saying, though, is that all of our marriages go through times where both one or both spouses is not going to fully and completely live up to the Christian ideal. And your job when you're in that time as the Christian spouse is to live
Step
up to
into
that
that.
ideal
Step into
and
the
pray for your
space.
spouse. Exactly. Live up to the ideal yourself and pray for your spouse. And yeah, sometimes you're going to have to rebuke them. Sometimes you're going to have to say things. But, like,
Yeah,
for the most part,
but importantly, rebuking is a long way from
right,
like
exactly.
like the Muslims thing is like it's like it start like we said like it starts out nice like oh men should men
Right.
should serve their husbands etc and then but it essentially ruins it by saying oh yeah and if she's being stubborn and if she annoys you you know beat her up
Right.
like
Yeah, it does ruin it
that's the
because
massage. See, people. Sorry to cut you off.
no, you're good. Go ahead.
I was like, let me cook, let me
That's
cook.
right. Let him cook.
But it's like that is misogyny. Misogyny is essentially because we're talking about misogyny, like hatred of women. Misogyny isn't saying mean sounding things about women
Right.
because if that was the case, the Bible is also misandric or whatever the word is. Like it's
Yeah.
like actually I feel like it says like half the time it's even harsher towards men. And people always point out St. John Chrysostom, like, oh, but you look at what he said about women in this homily or whatever. It's like, have you read about what he said about men, no good men?
Right.
In fact, okay, while I'm sort of going off in this rant, um, while I'm sort of going off in this rant of mine, see if you could find some of the passages from St. John Chrysostom about like unfaithful husbands and like husbands who think it's okay to sleep around but expect their wives to be chaste. Like, see if you can track those down real quick because I want the audience to see this. But okay, so while he's looking for that, yeah, like misogyny isn't saying mean things about women. I mean, it could be if it you know doesn't equally criticize men. then it's misogyny. If it's just like, oh, men are all nice and chill and they're just victims of these parties or whatever, then it's misogyny. But funny enough, that's actually what you find a lot in Islamic literature. But that's neither
Right.
here
It is. It
nor
is.
there. But but
Here's a quote
what
from
is
St. John Chrysostom. St. John Chrysostom says, "Sin makes a man a coward. The life in the truth of Christ makes a man bold." So he's from St. John Chrysostom's perspective, he has the opposite perspective from the red pill guys. He's like, if you are living in sin, then you're just a coward. He thinks you're a beta.
yeah? Let's let's see if we
Here's
can.
another one. He says that he talks about if. Okay, hold on a second. I have to scroll past. He has some things with women too, but here's one he talks about. Wealthy men in particular who were going to the context of this is that they were going to these shows where there would be like a pool and naked women would be like swimming around in the pool and wealthy men would go and pay to see this. And he says that let your money perish with you and as and you'll be judged by God for doing this. He says that it's adultery and that that it is the height of depravity going to these shows. Basically looking at porn is the height just looking at naked women who aren't your wife. This is the height of depravity. Like you disgust God when you do this. It's disgusting and shameful that this should even be named among Christians. And he goes on to list all sorts of things that you could have done with that money, and instead you want to watch a naked girl swim. Like,
What are some of the things he lists?
you could feed the poor, you could clothe the naked, you could
Hmm.
build churches with the money that you're spending to watch naked girls swim. With the money that you're spending to watch a naked girl swim, you could see the beggar at the church door and give him food to eat. Like, like this is, I mean, like think about how scathing this rebuke would be if you're that dude. Like you're the dude sitting there who just came from watching one of these shows and then you show up at church the next day and your pastor is like, "Screw you. You done you done messed up, AA Ron."
Yeah.
Oh. But
Let-
like, I mean, you're right. This thing with Islam again, it ruins it because all of those nice things that it might have said are ruined by the fact that it treats the instead of treating a woman as a creation of God meant to be a blessing to us, that he who findeth a wife findeth a good thing. Instead of that,
yeah.
it treats the woman as a a problem that needs to be solved by
Yeah.
whatever means
Yeah. Like
necessary.
control your wife or whatever. It's
Exactly.
like, and it's like, again, this goes against the biblical because Islam does sort of ape a bit of Judeo-Christian morality in
Right.
some areas, like, oh, feed the poor and give to the less fortunate or whatever. So I'm not gonna lie, like there are some nice things, but the demons are good at corrupting nice things. So
Right. Yeah, I mean
so any good that it has is in
Islam is
spite of
basically a
its
heresy of Christianity, so of course it
any
mimics certain
any goodness
things.
that it has is in spite of itself, not because of itself.
Right?
So um so and this is what it shows, like, because what are the ideals of the pagans? Strength matters,
Right.
right? Like the strong dominate the weak. That's why in pagan homosexual context, you were you were sort of treated like a you were sort of treated like an F word if you were the submissive party. But if you're the dominant party, you're just being a man, man. Like
Right.
Islam. So Islam, when you really look into its morals and ideals, it's very pagan.
Definitely. Yeah,
Um,
might
and
makes
this is
right.
yeah, and this is one of those things. If your wife is annoying you and irritating you and being stubborn, try to reason with her. But if she's still being stubborn, uh, don't sleep with her. Okay, so far that's not something we Christians would agree with. Uh, sorry, that's not something that we Christians would disagree with. Yeah, like if you need to take some time away from her, you know what? I'm just gonna go over here and let you, work this out because you don't want to listen. Um, but it's that final part, and if she still doesn't listen, beat her. Like
Right.
it's essentially like my wife is a freaking headache. She won't listen, so I'm gonna punch her. It's like after it just got done saying she's the weaker party,
Right.
like like that's the difference in the
Exactly.
Christian ideal. You don't just beat your problems away. Like
Right.
you're
Exactly.
you're supposed to be more more generous towards the weak, towards those who are weaker and more vulnerable than you are. And so, I mean, the reason why I find domestic violence so abhorrent is precisely because, unlike feminists, I know that women are weaker than men. So a
Exactly.
man, a man physically hitting his wife is a freaking bully.
Right. Yeah. No two
It's
ways
like
about it.
it's like pick on someone your own size, you piece of like.
Yeah, no kidding. I mean, yeah, no, you're absolutely right. The reason this is so disgusting is um is the same reason why it enrages me and it enrages God to see someone abuse, a puppy or a kitten. This creature can't really fight back, not truly. And so you have a responsibility as the one who's stronger and smarter than the animal to treat this animal with the same kind of sort of respect that and love that God has towards us. Because what if God decided to treat us the way that, oh, you're not listening to me. Okay, well, I'll crush you. Yeah, that wouldn't end well for us. We
Yeah.
wouldn't like it
Uh,
if God did that to us. Um,
Although, real quick, just on a
yeah,
quick aside, because one thing that I've learned through dialogue and debate is how to anticipate objections. So there's already one objection I can anticipate, so I'll let you sort of nip it in the bud.
sure.
Like, oh, you Christians talk a big game about being kind. The more vulnerable and defenseless a party is, the more kind you have to be. And yet you're okay with corporal punishment. Why is it okay to hit your kid but not your wife? So
Okay.
I'm already anticipating that objection.
Sure. No, that's actually a fair question. So there's a couple of things. One is that we actually don't believe that it's always okay to hit your kids.
Mhm.
Um, there's parameters around that. Another is that the language of beat is a little bit that's outside of even what we would say for our own kids. Like if your kid is being if your kid is being bad on the level that it warrants like a spanking, then in a Christian household, the way that that works is, you spank your kid and then you embrace your kid and pray together and you restore the relationship. It's not just like you're actually not in Christianity, you're actually not supposed to ever spank your kids when you're angry.
Yeah,
If you're angry, you're actually required to stop, remove yourself, and potentially even um, let the moment pass without administering discipline because of your rage. It's better to let a child go undisciplined than to discipline them in rage. I don't have any quotes ready, but tons of saints say that. That's not something I just made up.
Yeah.
Tons of saints say that. And
Yeah, because when you're angry, you act impulsively.
exactly, you act impulsively and you teach your child the passions. Christian discipline is about teaching self-control. So if I'm disciplining and I actually had to, so I have an adult daughter and I actually went to her and apologized to her yesterday and I said, when you were much younger, I many times was a horrible witness of the Christian faith because I was way too strict when I should have been more lenient. Um I didn't have inner peace at the time, and so I lost my temper with you, and I never should have let I never should have lost my temper with you, and I'm so sorry. And she, you know, instantly forgave me and hugged me or whatever and was like, you're not like that anymore. God has changed you. Like, but at the same time, I had to apologize to her. Yeah, I'm not like that anymore, but the fact that I ever was disgusts me. It horrifies me.
Yeah,
And we ought never teach our children that it's okay to be given to the passions like that. And other things too.
yeah,
You don't like I said, spankings should never be like your first resort either.
yeah,
Parents who are too quick to spank their kids, like that's really setting a bad example in and of itself. So the question is actually a good one. Like if you're dealing with a person who's like really quick to spank their kids and sort of like they don't really admonish their
mhm,
kids, they don't really like talk to their kids or show their kids the right way, they just
yeah,
spank them into submission. That's wrong too. Like you're not supposed to
yeah.
just
And one thing that I would add is, I feel like to some degree, Islam, uh, and surrounding pagan traditions saw women as like kind of stupid,
yeah,
like not really fully adults. Like the reasoning in a lot of these cultures for why, like, as Christianity has patriarchy as well, but in Christianity it's like, okay, the man leads by example and acts as like sort of the self-sacrificing uh like king of the house or whatever, like
right,
not a tyrant, but like God, like God acts towards his church and his
right,
people. But and when and is expected to act graciously like that even when his wife and kids are not, and vice versa,
right.
like a woman is expected to act like graciously even when her husband is not. So but the justification for patriarchy in pagan cultures, and I would argue in Islam, is atrocious. Is because
Right.
essentially women are seen as having lesser intelligence, essentially being like minors in adult bodies. Like you have to make the decisions for your wife, not because God has appointed you as her caretaker, and protector in like like a adult, like a equal adult relationship, but because you're essentially like her new daddy. Like she'll be, she could be 30 years old, but she's still like a little girl, so you have to like babysit her. and just like
Right.
and just like you would hit a disobedient child, you have to hit a disobedient wife because she's essentially a minor in an adult body. That's, I think, the reasoning behind why in Islam is permitted to hit your wife, and that's
Yeah, there
also
is
why it would
there is a tacit
okay.
assumption, if not outright statement, that women are inferior in the sense, not in the sense of being weaker, but in the sense of just having less value. And
Yeah,
um and Christianity violently, vehemently disagrees with that. In fact, I would argue that the patriarchy does not work without women. Women have equal value as women. This is actually one of my objections to feminism, is that feminism does not ascribe women value unless they act like men. I say no. Women have equal value because they are women. They don't need to be an inferior man in order to have any value. They actually
Yeah,
have value as women.
right.
Um, yeah,
And I
go
would
ahead.
argue that we Orthodox are that we old apostolic churches in general are especially positioned to articulate that point because of the Theotokos.
Yes, absolutely. The
Sorry,
Theotokos.
Protestant.
No, you're good. Yeah. No, no, you're right. You're right. The greatest saint is a woman, and she became the greatest saint by doing womanly things. She did not.
and the, sorry, go ahead.
No, no, you're good. Go ahead.
Well, I mean, I'll let you finish the thought before because I know we've
Okay.
been.
No, I was just gonna say she didn't like go off and become a general or something. She didn't go off and become a CEO. She didn't dominate her husband. None of that. None of those were the reason why she became the greatest saint. She became the greatest saint by being womanly and by living out and fulfilling her calling as a woman perfectly, but she's simultaneously perfectly feminine and also greater than, I would argue, greater than any man besides her son. So go ahead, Sako.
Yeah. I was gonna say that one of the sort of revolutionary things about Christianity, I would argue, in much of the ancient world. Although, okay, to some degree, I will be a little generous. The maybe like the Platonists, who were a bit more on the egalitarian side, also had a bit of this. But as like the vast majority of society weren't Platonists, so you know.
Right,
Um, but I would say Christianity, in terms of like societal rules for everyone, was the first sort of religious and cultural system to give women the right to opt out of marriage if they chose to live celibate lives. Like in most societies, that wasn't an option.
right. Yeah, we
Like
see that with like the story of Paul and Thecla.
yeah, Paul and Thecla, Saint Paula, I think there was like a Saint Junia,
Saint Junia.
Saint Olympia, one of my favorites.
Yeah. I think
So
even Saint Philomene, Saint Catherine of the
yeah,
Wheel.
right, and so um like like the very notion that like a woman must must like has a say, right? The very notion of consent that modern feminism takes so much for granted. Uh, as a Christian, I gotta say, you're welcome.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, the
Like
concept of, no, you're right. The concept of consent is a Christian concept. Prior to Christianity, that really was not something that
yeah,
people
yeah, your father
believed.
would essentially just decide your fate. If he wanted to marry you off to like an abusive fishmonger or something, you didn't really have much of a say in it.
Exactly.
In much of the
Exactly.
pagan world. I'm saying as a general rule, okay? So like, don't come at me with like, Roman law code number
Yeah,
like whatever. Like I'm not saying it never happened. I'm
right.
just saying like in general, the general rule was you're a girl above a certain age, we're marrying you off.
Right.
If you're
And to
lucky,
reject that was seen as like an act of rebellion. Like in the case of Thecla, she was uh, nearly martyred
yeah,
several
her suitors were
times.
literally her suitors were trying to rape her.
Yeah, at multiple points. Like there was, yeah, and she was seen as being in the wrong for refusing them. Like that's the thing that I don't think modern feminists even understand. Okay.
Right.
uh,
And the reason for that is not you know, my body, my choice.
Right.
It's I'm giving my body to God.
Exactly. Exactly. Yeah, because my body,
So
my choice is not really a concept in Christianity for either the husband or the wife. Um, you do actually have a
yeah,
responsibility to give yourself to your spouse.
yeah, like if you're a husband and you're like like say getting blasphemous tattoos and your wife is like, hey, those tattoos are not cool, the children are gonna see that, you
Right.
know, or whatever. You can't say you know, step aside, woman, my body, my choice.
Right.
No, it's
Exactly.
your body belongs to her. If she says you can't get the tattoos, you can't get the tattoos.
That's right.
If they're of blasphemous nature, and vice versa.
Yeah.
And so Christianity has like essentially um, pioneered the okay, it began in the Old Testament, but really reached its full flower in Christianity, and in the early church.
Right.
The idea that you can say no, that like someone can't just decide what you're gonna. Someone who is not your husband or wife can't decide what you do with your body, because your body, before you know you're married, your body isn't your own, it belongs to God.
Exactly. Yeah.
So there now there's another interesting topic that I want to focus on, while we're talking about like the difference between patriarchy and misogyny.
Yeah.
And is this section that I would like to call misogyny is gay.
It is though. It is
Because
though.
there, and for this I want to see if we could find some I feel bad for you that like I'm having you pull all this stuff up. I wish I had remembered it before we started recording. Um, because I was going to see if we could pull up some quotes from Greek philosophers. Maybe we could even have ChatGPT like search on the internet for us to make it faster.
Let me see.
Quotes that essentially like denigrate male and female romance to like, or male and female procreation, like sex to procreation, while sort of elevating male friendships as the truest expressions of love. Male friendships, what you know, whether they're sexual or not sexual. Like, like, like I'm imagining a. The, do you ever watch the show Boondocks?
Yeah.
Yeah, a rapper, like a rapper in there called Gangstalicious, who's like secretly gay.
Right.
And he made a song called "Home is over house, home is over house, home is over." Do the home, do the home. Sorry. Um, and the music video is essentially him like hanging out in the club with his boys, and then like a girl tries to approach him on stage, and he just he's like pushes her back, like back away from me, and she like falls off the stage. um, and then, but but it's essentially like talk like the whole song is like talking shit about women, like you know, calling them b words and this and that,
Right.
while saying like you can only trust the homies, but there's like a lot of sort of homoerotic undertones throughout the whole thing. So so that's kind of something like the whole homies over hose thing is like all over Greek, a lot of
Yeah.
Greek philosophy and thought.
It's yeah, it's super gay. I mean, even before we get into the Greek philosophers, I'll just say Andrew Tate has some really sometimes like he creeps me out.
Yeah.
Like okay, so
Remember the incident with like when he was asked like, would you rather you know, do the deed with um like really ugly girl, but who's an actual girl, or like a really hot looking transgender person. And he's like the transgender person.
See, like, that's so weird, man. Like, what the hell? But he creeps me out with his gay stuff. Like, he had this one quote that said, I actually reposted it because I thought it was like I reposted it to it with a commentary mocking him because it was just like so absurd. He said that desiring to spend all your time with women is super gay, and and I'm just like no, actually that's the definition of heterosexual. Like loving women is gay. I'm like, actually that's the definition of. No, that was even what he said, like admiring female beauty is gay, and I was like, dude, that's the definition of heterosexual. But
Yeah,
uh yeah. So here's some uncomfortable quotes from various Greek philosophers. So well, I don't have a quote for this one, but let me see if but I have you ever read The Symposium by Plato?
it's been a long time, but
Okay. So
yeah.
I've read The Symposium a long time ago, and it was honestly it made me uncomfortable because it is pretty gay. But basically, the point of The Symposium is the point that he drives at eventually is this idea that the only real type of love is the love between two men, because if you love a woman, then you're not really loving her, you're loving her for her ability to give you offspring, according to Plato. Whereas if you love a man in like homoerotic love, then your love is related to the desire of education and the gaining of knowledge, which makes it superior to all other kinds of love. Like that's so stupid. But
Yeah,
anyway,
because apparently you can't have an intellectual conversation with a woman.
right. So this gets yeah, I mean this comes
Them,
back to
them,
like this
them
idea
women,
that
them women are too
that's
dumb to read them philosophies and whatnot.
that's right. Ew, girls. Um,
Yeah, dude, it's like the adult version of like boys go to college to get more knowledge, girls go to Jupiter to get even stupid. Like, it's the
right.
adult version of that. Like
It is.
Plato, man. What are you, a fourth grader?
Right, exactly. I mean, he does seem like a fourth year. I mean, this is pretty disgusting, actually, and this is
Uh-huh.
totally gonna get our episode banned. But, um, a lot of
Screw
people
it. We're in too deep, man.
we're in too deep. This is it. This is where the rabbit hole is leading. Ancient Greek society and ancient Rome, prior to Christianity, actually practiced pederasty as like a normal thing. So,
Mhm.
like old men defiling little boys was seen as totally normal in like most of Greek and Roman society. Um, to the point where um it was only seen as shameful for a man with a beard to be the passive partner, or allow himself to be penetrated by another grown-up man. Greeks had a pejorative expression for this, which was kenaroi. Um, but and they were the targets of ridicule by other citizens, especially comedy writers. Um, okay, I'm not going to read some of this because it talks about
Yeah.
pretty graphic detail, but the
Uh-huh.
point is that what it's driving at is that basically, like, if you were an old man or just had a beard and you were getting railed by, particularly by a young man, that was seen as like super gay and stupid. But if you were like an older man having sex with little boys or like especially teenage boys, that was seen as like a-okay. Just like a normal
Yeah.
part
Because
of
you're
life.
you're delivering, not receiving.
Right, exactly. Um, and it's just like that's super weird. The New Testament actually flips the script on this though, because not only is pederasty in general just seen as a sin, but actually the idea of like in Christianity it's actually reversed, where if you're the one receiving, like that's still a sin if you're consenting to it.
Mhm.
But if you're the one who's actually like lusting after another man and having sex with another man, that's actually seen as worse in Christianity
Yeah,
because you're willfully choosing this lifestyle and like
well, yeah,
and
and
lust is
you're oppressing the weaker party.
right.
Again, we get back to this biblical ideal of protecting the vulnerable.
Exactly.
Yeah. By the way, to our friends on the left, sorry, the Bible invented social justice.
Yeah, it did. You're welcome for that too.
I mean,
Um,
but and then even going into the Christian era, this is what's sad because this is why goes back to sort of my big criticism of like scholastic philosophers, not scholasticism as such, but scholasticism as it played out in the Latin Church.
right.
Um, because philosophy is all well and good if it's used in service of the gospel. When you try to conform the gospel consciously or subconsciously to the philosophy, that's
Yeah.
when you're running into error. And one of those instances with someone who I otherwise admire is Thomas Aquinas. Let's see if we can find the quote, but he says something about like he basically said, and I'm paraphrasing, that if it wasn't for procreation, um, like in matters of other than procreation, the relationships between men are superior because they're relationships of actual friendship and like admiration of like two equal parties or whatever. So again, at least he's not advocating railing young boys, but he still sort of has the holdover of that Greek
Right.
thinking of like you can't be friends with women. If you're friends with women, you're weird. You know, so the truest relationships are those you have with the guys, and he's essentially saying that if having babies wasn't a thing, then I guess I don't know, like men would just sort of live like spend time only with other guys and just have just a never-ending sausage party the whole like
Yeah. No, you're right. So Thomas
now to be
Aquinas,
now again to be fair to Aquinas, a non-sexual sausage party, but a sausage party nonetheless.
right. No, you're right. I mean, so I can't find the exact quote that you're talking about, but here's a quote that basically he says, this is from Summa Theologia, Q92A1, Objection 1, and it says, Woman should have been produced in Eden since she was necessary for the generation of the species. Going on to cite, with approval, Aristotle's famous affirmation, quote, a female is a misbegotten male, end quote. So Thomas
Ouch.
Aquinas actually affirms this false pagan idea that women are just inferior men, which, by the way, is also what feminists believe. Um, that's why feminists want women to act like men.
Yeah,
Uh,
and even if he doesn't say it, like the implication here, right, is also like very gay
yeah, it
because
is.
if because think about it, okay, women have a special have like a much softer feminine appearance, right? Now,
Right,
influenced by Aristotelian philosophy, Thomas Aquinas says that women are essentially like the product of a weaker sperm or whatever, right?
right.
So you have women with this like so you have men with like a more built like masculine appearance, like rougher features, whatever. Then you have women with like softer, more delicate features and or whatever. So what he's saying, if he's saying that women are essentially like weaker, misbegotten males, is men are superior, and that male features are superior, and ergo, uh, like if you're a woman, at least in some ways, your appearance is inferior to that of a male, and it's a male saying this, which is pretty
Right.
freaking gay.
Exactly. Gay.
I'm yelling at. I'm like zooming in and yelling at the screen a lot today, but I'm like, I'm on top of
Gay. It's like
my
the
polemical gay today.
professor in Community when he becomes a student and he's like super immature. Gay.
Frank,
That's
Frank
gay.
again, Frank again.
Oh, I mean it is though. Like it's super gay.
Yeah,
It's like Andrew Tate, just super gay.
it's
Um,
yeah, it's essentially just it's essentially just elegant red pill stuff, like
right,
more
it
elegant
is.
sounding red pill stuff. It's just like
Here's another quote from the Quran that I wanted to compare to Christianity. We
yeah,
have tons of these. We're not going to be able to get through all of them, but
uh-huh.
I wanted to compare this one. So it says, Quran 2:282 says, "And bring two witnesses from among your men, and if there are not two, then a man and two women." So the witness of a man is equal to the witness of two women. Um, I want to compare that. So that is actually very common in the ancient world, but compare that to Christianity, in which our whole entire faith, our whole entire gospel, actually rests on the testimony of women. Because it was
Yeah.
women who first see that Christ has risen, and it's those women who go to the apostles. And in the ancient world, this would have been seen as absurd. Like, you're these women's testimony wouldn't even have been accepted in court. But think about what a gold mine that is for the fact that Christianity spread like it did. This is a story that if they were lying, they wouldn't have told it this way. But here's the thing is that's
Yeah.
opposite. That's goes totally against what Islam is saying here, because Islam is basically saying, yeah, you can't trust women, so don't listen to their testimony. Unless there's two of them, then that's like equal to one guy.
The,
Um,
does it okay, just to check, because I don't want us to be caught with our butts out on this, okay? Does the Torah say anything about the testimony of women?
that's a good question. I don't remember the Torah.
Yeah.
Does the Torah say that? I mean,
Because I
actually,
know Muslims, they're gonna like reach for something in the Torah to pull out the whataboutism. So we should probably
well,
anticipate.
for one thing, um, let me just check. I mean, I know at least one thing that. Okay, hold on a second. Let me see. Da da da. Oh, this is some Jew. Let's see.
It's some Jew.
It is in well, this is some Jew's commentary, but he's not citing anything in the Torah, but
Uh,
he says that women can't testify in Jewish court, but then he turns around and says, but that's not actually found anywhere in the Torah. So, like,
Thank you.
okay. So I guess that answered my question.
Yeah.
In a way. Thanks, Jew. Um, but yeah, so no, I do know at least one instance in the Torah that does refer to a woman's testimony, which
Mhm.
actually goes back to what we were saying about consent being a Christian concept. So in the Torah, I don't remember where exactly this is, but in the Torah, if a man goes out to and basically has sex with a woman, if she's not consenting, then she is actually not seen as guilty of the act so long as it says cries out. If she cries out, then she is seen as not being guilty. And this is actually why when I'm doing biblical counseling, um, if you have small children, maybe have them leave the room right now. Um,
Mhm.
when I talk to particularly girls who have
Leave
been,
the
but
room now. Okay,
that's right.
thanks.
Um, when I talk to particularly girls who have been molested, I always say that you have to cry out. You have to report what has been done to you, even if the person who did it is somebody who is in authority or somebody who your parents are really close friends with, or God forbid, one of your parents himself. You have to cry out. You have to say what happened to you. You have an obligation to go public. Um, you don't share in the sin. You go public, you cry out. That's a modern application to this ancient principle that basically, if the woman cried out, then she was not seen as guilty because she was not consenting, and and that was true even in the Torah, and so that does show that a woman's testimony did matter to the Torah because if she
Yeah,
cried out, then she was basically testifying to her own innocence by crying out, and that testimony would be accepted. Um, but even if, okay, let's say, so I actually, when Muslim, I'm glad you brought that up because as an aside, when Muslims make arguments like that, like, oh, well, the Torah says something, something, so therefore, you're rebuking the fact that this is in the Quran. Well, here's the thing, Christianity is not legalistic in how we apply God's laws. God's
yeah,
laws are given to us, and then we have this thing called economia. So through economia, we can apply the law in different ways in different circumstances, whereas Islam is a text-based religion, which means that it's very legal, and because it's legal, you have this kind of absolute idea of like the text says this, therefore we do this. Christianity is not a text-based religion, and so we're able to have economia.
yeah.
Um, so that argument never really works anyway. Um, but yeah, so I think I think we've covered this idea of the Quran. I would love to come back to that, but I
In
want to
the
cover
future
some other
too.
stuff too. So,
Mm.
um, I think one thing that would be good for us to talk about is something you brought up before we started, which is, and I'll let you kind of introduce the idea, but like you brought up the idea of like, okay, how do we actually navigate like real
Mhm.
world situations? Like, I think you said like, could a woman be a nuclear physicist or something like that? Like, so
Right,
why don't
yeah,
you introduce this section for us?
right. So the important thing to sort of discern in when we speak of biblical patriarchy is like how would it play out in a situational basis, like in other
Economia.
words, yeah, exactly, economy, yeah. So like what are the universals and what are the particulars? So for example, when we speak of the ideal of a woman being like, the homemaker, the wife, the mother, and all that, are we saying that a woman shouldn't get an education past a certain point, or are we saying that a woman can't be in any intellectual field like an engineer or a mathematician or a scientist of some kind or a teacher or whatever? And the answer the answer to that is yes, they can,
Right.
because the well, first of all, not everyone has families. Like,
Right.
um, now Einstein was basically like a, a borderline deist, so he didn't even believe in you know God in a personal sense. So he couldn't really stay committed to marriage or whatever. But I've heard stories of other scientists who actually like lived almost like celibate lives. Like they never got married because they were essentially wedded to their scientific work, and they felt like having a family would not allow them to pursue that, and
Right.
vice versa. They wouldn't be able to be a good family person because because they would be so busy with work. So then, so like what you know, in the case of like a woman pursuing some sort of career, what would that look like? Well, I think one of my friends, his wife, sorry, not his wife, his mother is a good illustrative example. Um, his mother is a devout Christian woman, and and he had like he was one of seven brothers. I like that's crazy to think about because I'm one of three brothers, like seven. but but like she got a college education, and I think I know earlier when we were talking I said financial stuff, but now that I think about it, I think it's like in social work, like counseling and stuff.
Yeah.
So she got her degree in that, and then then when the time came, she put that off to the side. When she was having children, and so at least for like a good like 10 to 15 years, she was raising the kids. Eventually, some of the kids got old enough to where they could take care of the younger kids, which is another thing that you mentioned.
Yeah,
And she could get back to her career. It's like, okay, now the nest is empty. Now I can pursue a career
that's right.
that I'm passionate about. It's um, like you can be a counselor or a doctor or a lawyer at age 40 or
Yeah.
35 or like however old, right?
Yeah,
Like,
Rachel Wilson is another great example of this. She's an Orthodox Christian woman and author, and a brilliant woman, brilliant author. Has excellent books, very well researched. But she did not pursue, um, a career when her kids were small, and then as her kids have gotten older, now she's able to pursue writing, writing and doing speaking tours and things, and there's nothing wrong with that. I will say though that well, okay, one thing is like you said, like having a big family helps with that because as the older kids get older, they can then, help with the younger kids and stuff. But another thing I'll say is that we did our show one time criticizing capitalism. And this
yeah,
is another criticism I have of capitalism is that uh, the system we have right now sets women up to be forced into kind of this awkward situation where they don't really have or they don't really feel like they have a choice. Um, because the way that our society is set up right now, you end up in this awkward place where, like, everybody is expected to have two incomes. And if you don't have two incomes, then it's harder to make ends meet and pay your bills.
yeah,
And women are expected to go to college right out of high school, and as a result, get saddled with a whole bunch of debt. So unless she's married to a really wealthy man, all of that debt is going to be really crippling if she just steps away from her career for a time to raise kids. And so our modern society actually really crushes women's potential to be able to sort of leave a career for a time, raise her kids, and then step back into this role. My wife and I are able to work together as counselors now, and my wife stepped away from full-time work, and when our girls were little, she stepped away from full-time work, and she's even said, she worked part-time as a nurse back then, But she's even said now, she said, if I knew then what I know now, I would not have stayed in nursing at all. I would have completely stepped away and exclusively mothered my children. And, I completely agree with her. But at the same time, becoming a nurse required so much from her, required so
Yeah.
much output, so much money, so much time, so much and then there's the continuing education, the CEU type stuff that she had to do. Essentially, there was no time period um until she had to for her health where she could have stepped away from being a nurse
Yeah.
without just losing being a nurse. Um and even now as a counselor, it's not like she could just step away from that, like if God blessed us with like an Abraham Sarah thing and miraculously was given another child. um we there would be no realistic way. Um, I mean, we would make it work. We would do it. But I'm just saying
Yeah.
that it would be very stressful, very difficult, in to actually make that work. Again, I have no doubt in my mind that she would, and she's an amazing person, and I am certain that we would make it work by the grace of God, and that she would make it work, and that she would spend and be spent, and that she would step away, and that she would raise that kid, and all of those things. Although we also have, our Summerlin would help a lot, and so, that's a good example again of like when you have a family and you have a community, you can do some of these things. But the point
Right.
is that whether she stepped away or not, whether Summerlin helped, whatever, we're able to have this time now where we work together as counselors because we've laid that foundation in that time. And um,
Yeah.
people don't understand that, we put a lot on young women and we sort of give them this unrealistic expectation that, oh, you can have it all. You can be a mom and have a career and do all these things. It's not realistic. It's been proven. Elizabeth Warren, actually, despite herself, she's a feminist, but she even proved, she did a whole study and proved that it does not work. The two-income household is a myth. It's it doesn't work. It falls apart. Have You are trapped if you go into a career. You're trapped and you become limited in how much you can really give to your family. And that's unfortunate. It
Right.
breaks my heart to say, but it is the truth. And so, but we do this, and the heartbreaking reality is that it's crushing our families. Our birth rate as a country has dramatically gone down
Yeah.
since
Except
society moved in this way.
except for the rural sector. So
Yeah, yeah,
the
do
one
talk
the
about the
one
rural
reason why I'm very
aspect.
optimistic about the US, at least in terms of birth rates compared to the rest of the developing world, is because the precisely because the US has a rather healthy rural segment of the population that I feel like sort of carries the demographic weight on your shoulders.
Hmm. And
Um,
you do have the option to it's much easier, I should say, if you are living a rural life.
exactly. Sort of like, you know, and just sort of answer the premise, like yes, the answer is yes. As a like from a traditional Christian worldview, you can be, you know, you can be Marie Curie. Like you can be a nuclear scientist.
In
You can
fact,
be
Marie Curie did what she did under a more patriarchal society.
yeah, yeah. So again, that's another difference I would argue between us and
Right.
Islam, because in Islam, like at least especially under like Salafi Islam, the Salafi school, which is like the most um I would argue in certain respects is the most true to form when it comes to Islam, which is unfortunate, but that is the yeah.
Yeah, it's the
But
most rigid.
yeah, in Salafi like thing, like if you're a woman, unless you're just like going to the market or something, you can't even leave the home unaccompanied.
Right. Like
Like
Saudi Arabia.
you can't even like go walk. You can't even like go walk in the park by yourself
Right.
and like take a stroll. um, so you know, now again, in spite of those limitations, there are some female leaders in like prominent positions in the Islamic world. There are some like female mathematicians or nuclear scientists, especially in Iran. But that's more of a compromise than it's more of a bug in the system than a feature.
Right.
Like so by comparison, yeah, in under Christian patriarchy, yeah, women like the ideal for women is either like being a mother and homemaker or being celibate. But within that context, there's a lot more flexibility. So like we use the example of my friend, you can get a college education and put things on hold when you have kids and then pick that back up at a later date.
Hmm.
And even during the marriage, like while the kids are growing up, you could continue your education. Like, once a week, you could be, a woman tell her husband, like, hey, honey, can you take care of the kids tonight while I go to my night class or whatever? Like, that's totally fine. That's
Yeah.
something that you can do. Um, so even, despite all its negative connotations, the patriarchy is actually not as restrictive as you think. Maybe if you're in the Arab world, sorry, I don't know what to tell you, but
Right.
but
Well, if you're in the Arab death cult, at least. If you're in like the Christian Arab world, then
yeah,
it's probably pretty much like what we're describing. Well, to
yes. If
some
you're if you're
extent,
if,
I
if,
mean,
if
they
you're
have a
if
lot of
you're if you're
concessions
eating
that
at
they
if you're
expect to
eating
make.
at the Aloha snack bar,
Right.
you get
Oh, I get
you
it. That was awesome.
you have my permission to use that moving forward.
Aloha snack bar. That's amazing.
My
Uh,
friend, real quick, my friend, the way that came about is what one time a friend of mine was like, if I were to open up a halal place in Hawaii, would I call it the Aloha Snack Bar?
oh, that reminds me of a joke that I saw one time that was like, it was this Muslim guy and he's like, why do people always act like Islam is this terrible religion? What's the difference between Islam and any other religion? Why are people so much harder on Islam? And this woman replied to him, she said, the reason why people are harder on Islam than they are on any other religion is because if a Christian says praise the Lord, then you know something cool happened in their life. If a Jew says glory to God, then you know that like he just graduated college. If a Muslim says Allahu Akbar, everybody dives down. Like
Yeah,
that's what makes it like different. That's why we react differently.
yeah, and even like in like non uh Abrahamic context, like if a Hindu says Jai Ram, they're saluting God or
Right.
whatever. Like
Yeah, it's like you don't instantly assume that that Hindu is going to start shooting people or something. Like, um, so
yeah,
I want to we've said a lot to, and yes,
yeah,
like I do want to reiterate that the ideal is like I read from First Timothy 2, the ideal is for women to be homemakers, and we do encourage that. Um, but we're also, we're being realists. We know that it's hard to live this life, and we want you to understand economia. So we're not ignoring the economy either. But I also want to, we've called out women a little bit in a good way, in a loving way. I want to also call out men though. So
Mhm.
in the context of the patriarchy, we've talked about how women are to live out this ideal. I want to talk about how men are to live out this ideal. So, one thing I'm going to suggest is if you have the capacity to work from home, you should. You should work from home if you can. And the reason for that is because that enables you to be more involved in the life of your family, the day-to-day life of your family, which you should be involved in. You have an obligation as a husband to rule your household well, and a king can't rule his kingdom if he's spending most of or one third of his life
Out of the castle.
vacationing in yeah out I shouldn't say vacationing because work I commend you that you're working, that you're providing for your family, but if a king spent one third of his reign doing something other than ruling his kingdom, that would be seen as problematic, and rightly so. um so we should not be spending one third of our lives, or more than that if you have to commute, um, outside of the house, being gone, being away, and not being involved in our children's lives. We should spend. I get it if you have to do it, and I'm sorry, and I'm not trying to lay a burden on you that you can't bear, but for those who can work from home, or for those who can work a kind of job that requires less hours or whatever, for those who can make it work, do work from home. It is a way of being more involved in your family. And I would also encourage, I guess one other thing that I would encourage women to do is the Proverbs 31 wife learned ways of being a homemaker where she's still, she's making linens, she's doing these things, she's very active in the community, even as a homemaker. So that is not something that's in
Yeah.
any way sinful, and I would
And
encourage Christian women to do that, and I would
yeah,
encourage
or
Christian men like
yeah,
help your wife to cultivate those skills. If it's doing it with her, or if it's watching the kids so she can attend a night class like Sako was talking about, um, be supportive of those things. Be supportive of those kinds of goals as a husband so that your wife can learn more skills and be more active in the household things and be able to do that, and then that relieves some of the burden off of you so that you can spend more time with your family. Go ahead, Sako.
I was gonna say, and another feature of the ideal woman in Proverbs uh, is somebody who's good with money.
Right.
So, in
Yeah.
so in traditional societies, and a lot of traditional societies, and to some extent even today, uh, women didn't just like cook and clean things and feed the kids. They also like ran basically like uh,
They ran the
whatever the
household.
whatever the husband was you know was doing in his part of the house. Like the woman would essentially manage the workings of the house.
Mm-hmm.
Like
Exactly. Yeah, it's not just cooking and cleaning, it's doing the taxes. It's doing, the all of those are things that are part of the role of now I'm not saying that as if you're a husband, I'm not saying you're sinning if do the the tax books, but I am saying that like that is just like you're not sinning if you sweep the floor or whatever, but it's part of the woman's responsibility to do those things. So that's part of being a homemaker. And one other thing I would say for men that I think was really good that you kind of brought up there
Mhm.
is um it is our responsibility as men to provide for our wives, and so we should um we should, scripture tells us that a man who doesn't provide for his family is worse than an infidel. And that's really hard to
Yeah,
hear. But we need that's on us, man. We need to be putting forth that effort, you know, be providing for your wife. If you can, give your wife the option to stay home. Give your wife the ability to be with the kids. If you can, then, it might require you to. And the other thing is one more aspect that I think is particularly important for men and women, but men, we need to lead in this, is sacrifice. In order to
yeah,
have this traditional life, you might not be able to go on vacation every year. In order to have this traditional life, you might have to have only one car. In order to have this traditional life, you might have to have a couple of the kids sharing a bedroom, for a time, or whatever. That's not the end of the world. Um, we make sacrifices. You might not be able to eat out. You might not be able to go, to fast food places. You might have to, you know, we might have to, or you might have to go to fast food places sometimes because you can't
yeah.
eat out at like an actual restaurant. You
Although
just
although
stop
I would
at,
say try to limit it as much as you can.
yeah, limit it as much as you can. But what I mean is, like, if your wife is exhausted and she's like,
Yeah,
hey, can you pick up food? You might have to make the more difficult decision of saying, okay, I'm gonna eat, pick up some KFC on the way home. I'm not gonna eat,
yeah,
I'm not gonna buy something expensive. We're just gonna have, the least expensive. Or I might, okay, I'll come home and I'll pop in some 90-second rice, and so I'm
yeah,
honoring that you're exhausted and you're not able to make anything. I'll pop in some 90-second. Like you might not stop and get even the KFC. You might come home and do something simple. Um,
yeah, yeah.
Rice and beans.
Like if as long as you're not exhausted, hey man,
Yeah,
like come home and whip up something yourself. Like I would say, and this is one of those things that's very situational. You know, people sort of tend to have this sort of rigid idea, like at least hyper traditionalists, like they imagine like the husband sort of sitting with on the couch with his feet kicked up while the wife is cooking in the kitchen. Okay, sometimes she needs to rest and you need to cook. I mean, and even in the Bible, there are characters who cook. Jacob was cooking
yep,
a stew when Esau came and said, "Hey, can I have some of that?" Like
right,
men can cook. I love cooking. I just today, today um I made some rice and chicken that I marinated in yogurt, honey, and garam masala. Like that was
nice.
amazing.
Yeah,
But
that sounds
but
awesome.
yeah, and I cooked it for um for the family um that does a lot to help me while I'm here in Armenia. They help me find my apartment. They help with a bunch of other stuff. So it's like I wanted to show my gratitude by cooking them a meal, and
Yeah,
they loved it.
that's awesome. That's really
so
awesome.
so yeah, even a thing like if your wife is exhausted but you still got some juice in you or whatever, like come home, whip up some rice, air fry that chicken that you marinated overnight yesterday. Like
Right. Yeah.
by the way,
These are,
I can't recommend air fryers enough. Everybody get air fryers,
that's
but make
right.
but make sure the inside parts are steel and not Teflon because you want to avoid the forever chemicals.
Yeah. Definitely. Definitely.
But
So those are some things that I think are important for men to understand is like, yes, provide for your family and be willing to sacrifice. Be willing to, you know, make tough decisions. And I'm saying that specifically to men because we need to be the leaders in that. If we do that, our wives will, you know, our wives will generally do that too. If we show like, oh, I have to stop at Starbucks for my coffee in the morning, I can't possibly be asked to just brew a pot before I leave. If we show that, then we can't complain when we're, struggling to make ends meet. No, like make your coffee before you leave for work. And believe me when I tell you, I am the worst when it comes to spending money. Like I want to spend, well, I shouldn't say it that way. But I want to spend money. Like I want to be the guy who stops at Starbucks every morning. I want to be the guy who does these things, but I'm not because I know that if I want to have this life, this traditional life with my wife, then we have to make some sacrifices. And I specifically have to be the one who leads in making those sacrifices because I can't demand my family make sacrifices that I'm not making.
Right.
Did you have any closing remarks that you wanted to make, Sako?
Um, yeah, I mean, although before I say them, I was gonna say like after we stop the recording, don't hang up because I did have a couple questions before we call
Sure.
it a night.
And
But
I'm gonna say, I think we should even maybe do a part three where we
mhm,
go through some more of these. I want to go through more of these hadith. I want to go through more of the Quran. And the reason why is because I actually think that there's a
mhm,
lot of value in this sort of, um, like maybe this wouldn't even be necessarily directly related to this series, but just like comparing the patriarchy to these false ideas is actually helpful. Like it's helpful to see the patriarchy in comparison to feminism and to see how superior it is as an ideology. It's also helpful to see the actual patriarchy in comparison to something like Islam, and then you can see like this is why this ideology is better. But anyway, so I'm asking you if you're willing to do a part three, and you're asking
yep,
me if I'm willing to stay late. So hopefully yes to both.
yes, I am willing to do a part three. um, so yeah, in closing, um, it's very easy. I'm gonna attempt to be as elegant and moving as Father Stephen D. Young here, but probably gonna fail, but it's okay. Um, when we hear language these days, because we sort of recoil in the modern age when we hear words like obey and submit, because so much of our culture has grown up from the sort of Enlightenment eras, Enlightenment and post Enlightenment values of hyper individualism, my individual right to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. So when you tell me to obey, when you tell me to submit, like before I came back to the faith, I would have recoiled, like, what are you talking about? That's how dare you ask me to obey or submit,
Yeah,
or
bootlicker.
it kind of, yeah, it's like, and then I would say like that was me earlier in my youth, and then sort of earlier on in my time as a Hindu, although I will say that towards the end I came to expect, you know because of um my good Hindu Brahmana friend. He sort of like got me to see that in society there is a place for authority, a place for hierarchy,
Right.
and everybody can't do every job, or is and everybody is not fit for every job, and that's okay. So I sort of reached that realization even while I was still a Hindu, and it was again one of the many things that paved my road back to Christianity. But
Someday I hope that I get to meet this Brahmana friend so that I can thank him for leading you back to Christianity for me.
I can introduce you to him on Facebook.
Okay.
Yeah. But but yeah, just back, getting back to my point. Yeah, it's very easy in our society to hear words like submit and obey and just, you know, have a visceral reaction to them, but what we learn from both scripture and the teachings of the church is that in submission, in obedience, in humbling oneself, in
Hmm.
self-emptying, there's ultimate power and ultimate freedom. And and our very Lord and Savior Jesus Christ is a perfect embodiment of that. He was obedient to his Father till the very end, and he
Hmm.
was exalted and glorified. Although, being God, he always was, but even as a man, he was exalted and glorified. And those human beings throughout the history of salvation who gave themselves in humility to God were ultimately vindicated. And if you are someone who calls yourself a devout Christian, you will trust that this is true. Um, the the lives of the saints are another example of this.
Hmm.
I often say, like, Christianity is simultaneously a very masculine and a very feminine religion. Very masculine in that it really sort of toughens you up, it thickens your skin, it it allow by the grace of God, it makes you the kind of person that could endure unimaginable trials and tribulations with grit and dignity. But at the same time, the saints and ascetics like Saint Anthony and Saint Macarius, who are such embodiments of like masculine endurance, were described as sighing and weeping over their sins
That's right.
and the sins of the world. They would they would their they would drench their robes in tears. Uh, they would spend entire nights in tears. Um, in a very real sense, um, the church collectively is called the body of Christ, but in a very real sense, the individual believer in his obedience and his submission and his sort of self emptying before God is himself on an individual level, even um, an embodiment of what a bride is.
That's right.
So that's why I say, like, there is masculine strength in femininity, and there is femininity and masculine strength. The two need each other, and God made us to need each other.
Right.
The idea of, like, I don't need no man, or I don't need these women or whatever. It's like, no, you're lying to yourself.
Exactly.
Even even those of us who choose to live celibate lives, uh, like the great monks and ascetics, you're still like you're still asking for the intercessions of the Theotokos.
That's right.
If it's not your wife, it's your earthly mother. If it's not your earthly mother, it's the Queen of Heaven. But
That's
one
right.
but one way or another, you are not without a woman.
That's right.
And
And thank
and
God.
even yeah, thank God. And neither was Christ. I mean, in the case of Christ, it's more spiritual, but even God is not without a bride.
That's right.
So
Amen.
that's I guess that's what I have to say about that.
Yeah, you know what? And that was awesome and perfect. And I almost don't even want to have any closing thoughts because I almost want to just let us close on that. But the only thing that I want to add is to simply say, and it's not going to be anywhere near as eloquent, but to kind of piggyback off of that, in the modern world, we are trained to reject hierarchy. We are trained to, from the time we're very little, we're trained to love words like equality um, and everybody's equal and everybody's the same and fairness. Everything has to be fair. Um, but God didn't create the universe to be fair or equal. He created the universe to be hierarchical. And
Yeah.
we are actually honored and blessed when we live in accordance with God's design by acknowledging that hierarchy and
Yeah.
acknowledging that reality. We are actually cursed and diminished in our life when we live in opposition to that and try to create equality and try to create fairness. Um, and
Although,
people
although I
joke
would,
about like life is unfair, but the reality is that that
I would,
unfairness is built into life for a purpose, and that purpose is for you to become like Christ.
right. Um, and I would say that, um, that, if we define fairness as like justice, right? Because when people say that's not fair, they mean like that's not right or it shouldn't be this way, right? Now it
Right,
is often misused like how come he has the thing that I don't have? That's not fair or whatever,
right.
right? But at its core, it is touching on something good, and I would argue that God did make the universe to be fair, and the fall ruined it.
Well, right.
That
Yes.
God's hierarchy is fair. It might not be to our sort of limited childish human satisfaction, but it's
Yeah,
fair.
the
It's
I'm
fair
using
because
the
God
term
designed it.
fairness. You're right. I'm using the term fairness in a way that might not be absolutely precise.
Right.
Um, or maybe
But
I'm being too precise because the word fairness can have multiple meanings, and I'm using it
yeah,
as kind of like fair, meaning that everybody gets the same thing. It's like
right.
equality and and almost like you said, like when we cry out, like that's not fair because Johnny got more cookies than me. Well, like that doesn't necessarily mean it is unfair. Maybe Johnny um is from a poor family and he doesn't get, and you're from a rich family, so maybe you should willingly give some of your cookies to Johnny because he doesn't get as many cookies in life. Like you aren't necessarily the judge of what's fair, but I guess my point is that
Mhm.
like in the way we usually think of fairness is like equal equal
Yeah,
playing field, and that's just not part of life. But you're
right.
absolutely right that the way God created the universe, it was created in such a way that it was perfectly just. It was fair in the sense of being justified, being right.
Yeah.
And in that way, it was fair. So, thank you so much for watching our or listening to our show today. And please do share this with your friends, especially your feminist or Muslim friends, so that they too can be freed indeed. And stay tuned for a part three where we're going to cover really kind of maybe even part three and four. Like, stay tuned for a whole series where we're going to be continuing to examine like this is what Islam teaches versus us. This is what feminism teaches versus us, etc. And God bless. Thank you guys.